So I think we're live right now. Need to double check that so I don't end up doing what I did yesterday. All right, it's live. We're good. Nice.
It's live. We're good.
Let me go ahead and
It's live. We're good.
turn this off. All right, so I'm just coding some stuff. No lecture or anything today. Basically, I'll try to talk out loud a little bit so you can understand what I'm working on. But I have a video that I posted the other day about a project I've been working on that's essentially just a what you see is what you get WYSWYG live site editor where anybody can go to a template and just click on the text and change it directly on the site. And then once they've structured the page the way they want with the content that they want to input, they just click a download button and it downloads the website for them. So this is the backend for that using Express. I was also doing it with Rails just for the heck of it. But because I write more Express applications, my workflow is a lot faster using Express. So that's what I'm going to stick with. Some terrible itch happening on my nose. Okay, so let's get into it. I have like a quasi little kind of Kanban card set up here. I'm not using Trello or anything. Just have user stories and some admin stories and a backlog of real basic stuff just to help me like stay on track. And some of these things need to be refactored because I've pivoted a couple times since I started the project. But this completely unstyled, by the way, so hopefully that doesn't bother you. The moment the server goes up, the user's logged in. You stay logged in the whole time. That way I don't spend a whole bunch of time every time I'm testing going in and logging in. So persistent session, and you have the option to log out, but it would just log you right back in. So then you can view all available templates. And then currently the way I have it is that a user will see a template. It'll have like a demo and a thumbnail and a description and all that. And then when they decide like that's the template of, the 100 templates they're browsing, filtering through, they'll say that's the one I want to use. Then they'll click use or edit or whatever the verbiage is. And it will essentially clone that particular template and assign it to that user. So this is a user behind a paywall. They've signed up for this service to be able to edit these templates directly and download their code to use in their own projects. So that's kind of where we are currently. I don't know if you go to the show page, that doesn't work. So that does work, except for the image is, there's the image. Took a second to load. It's not optimized for web. I just threw a random URL in there. So it took like a half second. Also, we're in incognito, so nothing is cached. So that's our camel. All right, so if this is working properly, this particular template, let's go back real quick. So the ID on this one is 3F1. This one is 2DB. So this is the copy that was created and assigned to the user. On the index, I don't have them filtered to show separate the user's templates, the ones that they select, versus the public templates, the ones that anybody can choose from. So we haven't gotten that far yet. But what we're looking at here is essentially a template that someone said, that's a template I want to use. And so now if they go in here, fingers crossed, they should be able to change this to something custom. And then they can just tab through each of the text on the page, so it's accessible in that way. They can shift tab to go back up. Once they get on a line, they can select any part of the line and change it as well. And then if they remove something entirely, it's just going to blank out. And if they go away from it and they come back, that's not a great UI feature, because if you're clicking, you can't really see. In fact, I think now that text has been removed, it's like off the DOM altogether. The other thing, if you click on the text directly, you get this little pop-up for the color of the font. And then you go in and change it to whatever you want. And as soon as you click outside of this little component, then that color is applied to the text. So the UI on this is not great. The styling's not great, but it's functional. The only thing is the colors don't persist currently. And also we got to figure out a way to get that text back, because now that it's gone and it's persisting, I'm curious to see what happens if we refresh. Okay, so the colors don't persist, like I said, but also that email is gone entirely. So we can go look for it and see what happened to it, to the element. Okay, so as a developer, we can see this paragraph here. Ooh, interesting. So a second ago, when we were looking around for it, we couldn't find it. I'm clicking, but if I'm on this one and I tab, like this is the other thing about the color selector that I don't like, is that like once you have it open and you don't want to use it, it's kind of quirky to get it to go away. So there it is. I didn't really want the color thing, so I'm going to change the way the colors work. Maybe I'll just have like a floating box somewhere, a box like maybe a little floating sidebar that comes out and gives you options for like font size and color and font name, etc. So we'll definitely have to put that in the backlog. But what I was trying to do was tab through. There it is. So when you're on this line, you can't see the cursor, so that's not great. You can start typing, and there it is. This is the email line. So it's there. Even if you make it disappear, now your cursor disappears. So that's a weird visual thing. This is in Microsoft Edge. It's probably similar in other Chromium browsers, but yeah. So that's email at email.com or whatever you want it to be. And again, everything persists the moment you change. So if you refresh, if you go away and you come back, these changes are still here. So you can say like, call me or something. You go away, you come back, it says call me. All right, that's great. I do want to implement the sidebar feature like I was talking about. I'm actually like more curious to do the changing of the image. I had it previously where if you had an image in here, then when you clicked on the image, it gave you a image upload. It replaced the image with an image upload input. And then when you selected the image off your computer, it changed it. It didn't persist. I didn't have it uploading to the file storage or the database or a third-party API or anything like that. I just had it to where it would change it momentarily until you refreshed the page. So that was for images. This, although it looks like an image, it's not an image tag. It's a div. If we inspect, it's a div with a class of right. And then if you go over here, you can see background image is this Unsplash URL. So we want a way for sure to allow whoever's editing the page, the client, to go in here and say, I don't want to have a camel on my website. I want to change that to something else. So yeah, on a tangent, like a tool like this, you could make it really robust, and then all of a sudden you're basically just like trying to rebuild Wix, right? But why do that? Because they basically have a pretty big stake in the market. I think the audience who this might be the most valuable to, because you get the ability to download the code, is somebody who wants to really quickly bootstrap a template with the content for their client. So maybe you offer small business websites or something like that, and you just need to throw something together quick to show your client. You have a host of templates to choose from, and you could do it live and say like, hey, this is what it looks like when your logo is uploaded, or when this paragraph, like live editing in front of the customer is a nice feature, but then also just being able to download that and plug it into the website right away also seems like it could be useful, or not. We'll find out. This is kind of a build it and they will come method, which is not ideal, but I'm really just having fun and learning, so I'm not too worried about it. All right. So I'm going to check in with YouTube real quick. And just make sure that the stream is going. Don't want to be talking forever and find out that it's not working. Looks like it's working. All right. So let's dive into some code, shall we? These are just a bunch of requests that we're making every time. You'll see that these put requests are happening pretty frequently, and what those are is every time an input changes on the website, you get a put request. So if you go here and you do a backspace, that's a put request. And you type a character, that's a put request. Every time you type a character on input, we're changing the state of that element in the database. So change me to something. And this silly little color thing is kind of annoying. That's interesting. We just lost the text, and I think it's not because we got rid of the text. I think it's because we changed the font to white, which is obviously not going to work. So, oh, weird. What's going on? Oh, maybe I like backspaced out of it. I must have had it selected or something. Okay. So these are things to note from usability perspective, right? Because even as a savvy developer or designer, if you go in here and all of a sudden your text disappears, like that's not good. So maybe there needs to be some extra code that says, hey, you just changed the color of this text to the same color as the background behind it. You're not going to be able to see it. Are you sure you want to make that change? Or maybe there's like a highlight feature that no matter what color it is, you can still see it. So I don't know. It's things to think about. So a lot like when you come up with an idea like an application like this, you think it's so simple, like, oh, I'll just build this thing. But as you like drill down into every little aspect of it and making it something that's usable and kind of error-proof, user-friendly, then it becomes a big thing. It gets kind of complicated pretty fast. So let's see if we can figure out how to get this image to change over here on click. So let's think about that. Also, I'm going to be using ChatGPT just because it's a super helpful way to write a bunch of code really quickly and kind of just bounce ideas off of something if you don't have someone else to bounce ideas off of. So the trick here is that it's a div that has a background image property in the CSS, and the background image property is pointing to a URL. So because this is, look, we're not just talking about this camel here, we're talking about any potential template that has any divs or any elements for that matter that have a background image applied to them. We need to be able to parse the entire website and find all those elements and then create a user interface that allows you to easily overwrite it or click on it, add some type of listener, some type of feature that allows you to modify the background URL or the background image URL. So we're going to have a little chat with chat. Hopefully it's working for us. So let's think about the prompt. We'll say, write some JavaScript that finds all elements on a page, elements on a page with a background image property and creates a button that allows the user to update the background image URL with a value from a text input. Let's just give it that and see what it does. All right, first things first, it's going to find all elements with a background image property. And the way that it does that is it uses a selector style asterisk is equal to, and then inside of single quotes, background hyphen image. creates an image, creates a button to update the background image, and then just add some text to it using the var keyword over here, old school. Create a text input for the new background image. So it's just dynamically creating elements and then appending the elements to the body of the website. If you had like a sidebar, like I mentioned earlier, a little toolbox type hover floating thing, then you might just append it to that. But right now we're just kind of bootstrapping things together, so we're not really worried about the full implementation. So then you add an event listener to the button to update the background image. So the update button is the button we created. And when you click on it, it loops over all of the elements with the background image property. And then it sets all of them, all their background image properties, URLs to the value from the text input. So this is interesting. We'll drop this into a code pen. This is not exactly what we want, but it's enough to get our creative juices flowing and figure out what we want. So we'll plug this into JavaScript. And what we need over here, you'll notice right away it appended to the DOM a button, update background image, and then an input. So we're going to create a div over here. We'll just give it an ID so we can select it really easily. ID is equal to, and we'll just call it main. And then we'll do main. Of course, we have to select it properly. And then we'll do the background property URL. And here I'm just going to jump back over and snag this URL Unsplash. Okay, see if we can, we'll just copy the whole thing, it's fine. Paste that in, and it floated it down, but that's okay. It's just so it all fits on the visible area. So it's wrapping. Okay, so the main thing here that you can't see is because there's no width. So let's give it like a 500 pixel width, and we'll give it a little height of like 500. Let's make a square. That actually seems bigger than I wanted it to be. That's interesting. Background property, if you are paying attention, Ian, you would know that is not the property name. Background image is the real deal that we want. So this is interesting. This is actually a pretty large image. We didn't crop it or anything. We do have a width here, 687. I wonder if we change that to 500, what that will do. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but it doesn't look like it's working properly. So then we would do something like background size, I think is cover or something like that. Oh, there we go. So it covered it, and then you can do like a background position. We can just look at 50%, 50%, center, essentially. Hey, that's looking pretty good, right? Not a big deal there. So now let's go get a URL for a different image. So we'll pop on over to Unsplash and see if we can find something that would look cool. All right, I like this one. So let's go ahead and copy the image link. And if we paste the link into the input and we click update background image, it doesn't work. Let's get rid of all this junk. And let's try it again. So we click update background image, and it's not telling us anything. So what we can do initially here is just throw a debugger, and I see a potential issue like right out of the gate. So it reloads the page when you change the JS in CodePen, pretty nice. And so what we want to do is we'll look at the elements. And what do you know? Kind of small, so let me drag it up for you. But basically the node list that query selector all returns, kind of an array type data structure used on the front end, points to a list of nodes in the DOM. It's empty. And the reason it's empty is if we go to the elements on the page, we have to be careful here because this is showing not just the HTML for our little website here, it's also showing it for like the entire page. So We'll go ahead and go to console, elements, main. So here we are. Notice that this div ID main, it has the ID, which has the background image, but it doesn't have style, a style, what am I trying to say here? Property or whatever attribute on the div itself, right? And so I can show you kind of what that would look like if it did. So we'll leave the styling of like the position and the height and the width and everything, but then we'll go over here and we'll add a style attribute and we'll put the background image here on the element. Then we'll go borrow this link to this image and we'll go down, we'll paste it in and we'll update the background image, and it works. And the reason it works is because this selector right here is selecting elements that have a style attribute with a background image property. It's not selecting elements that have a selector with a background image property. So that's fine, but it's problematic in that it doesn't give us a lot of freedom with how the templates are created. So like if we're thinking on a larger scope, our website is giving people a way to select a template and then make it their own and then download it, right? They should be able to change the images and the text at the very least, but ideally also eventually in the future, maybe positioning things or hiding things, showing things, etc. So in the current iteration of this whole thing, we're changing the text and we're changing the images. Now we have to think about where the templates are coming from. If we, the sole site developer owner, are creating the templates manually, then we can structure them any way we want. We can make sure that all images, any element that has a background image, is using the style attribute to apply that image, and therefore this code will work. But what if we open it up to any designer out there, because I'm not the best designer, I don't want to be in charge of making all these templates, and a designer signs up, not as necessarily somebody who's going to use these designs, or maybe they will, but from the other side of things where they're uploading their personal templates to be used. Maybe they get like a profit share or something of any templates that get used by the clients, but they sign up, they upload a template, and yeah, we can have a little guide that says like, hey, make sure that all of your background images are on style attributes. But even then, like, that's not necessarily good practice. Ideally, all the styling would be separated from the HTML, separation of concerns, put it into a CSS file. So let's see if we can run back. Like, now that we have some feedback, let's go back over to chat and see if we can get it to give us something a little bit different. And so that is here. One quick second, I gotta answer a text message. All right, sorry about that. So it did the thing, and we'll say, is it possible to select elements whose CSS selectors are applying the background image property? Of course, anything's possible. Let's do it. Oh, so one way to achieve it is by using jQuery, and I'm not booing on jQuery. I just would rather not have to load any non-vanilla libraries. I guess any libraries non-vanilla, but I just don't want to load any libraries if I don't have to. So this is interesting. And an alternative is to use getComputedStyle, which is a method available from the DOM APIs that you can filter out the elements by checking their compute styles. So this is an interesting, this code only needs to run one time. And because we're just dealing with pretty straightforward templates, I don't think this code would be too difficult or too cumbersome to run. So let's try it. We're going to replace what we've got here for selecting the elements. And real quick, I'm just going to select, I'm going to drop this over here into a new file, right? And we're going to select all these vars, and we're just going to change them all to a let. I don't want to do a const and accidentally. Well, we could run a const and see what happens, I guess. Make them a constant. It's going to bark at us if any of the variables are being overwritten later, and that's fine as long as it tells us which ones we need to change. So, oh man, I've got like a little gnat flying around. Get out of here. Get out of here. All right, so elements is equal to document query selector. It's just getting all elements on the page. And then it's saying create an array from elements, because the query selector all, if you remember from earlier, returns a node list, right? A list of nodes. So we want to create an array from that node list. That way we can use the dot filter method on it. And for each element in the array, so each DOM element, we're going to assign a variable computed style to the window.getComputed style method, passing in the DOM element to get its compute style. So then we assign that to the variable. And the next thing we return is the variable get property value background image does not equal none. So here, basically, we're saying, give us a new array, only return DOM elements whose get property value method with background image as a argument returns something. If it returns something, we know that it has a background image, and therefore we want to make it one of our elements that we can update. So then further down, this code right here is no bueno anyway, this update button, blah, blah, because this is going to do it to all of the elements on the page. So we'll show an example of that in a second. But now we should be able to remove the style attribute. And here we have the background image with URL. That's all good. JavaScript over here is barking at me, so let's go take a look at it. This is what I was worried about earlier. So we have an assignment to a constant variable, which is the, I think the computed style. I don't know where the assignment is happening, but we'll just make it let and see. That seems like it. What do you want? What do you want from me? Assignment to a constant variable. Oh, I think. Okay, this is what's happening. I missed it. Const there is fine. Const elements is equal to document query selector all is no bueno, because then it's trying to overwrite elements a second time. So you have two options. We can either let elements and then overwrite elements with whatever the results from the array.from.filter gives us, or we could call this like all elements, and then we could say another const elements is equal to array.from all elements. In this case, we're just going to slap the let keyword on there. Okay, so now if this is working properly, we'll go ahead and save it. We'll go get our image URL, and it's in a little comment here, so we don't have to keep jumping back and forth. Okay, line, so we can easily select and copy it. Oop, great. All right, so now if we go here and we paste this in, update background image, now it works. And it works on an element whose background image is not applied from the style attribute, but rather from a CSS selector, in this case, an ID selector with the background image property. Baller. We're almost there, right? So here we have, it's yelling at me about something, assignment to a constant variable. Elements, what do you want? What do you want from me? It's worked, so it's weird that I wish it would tell me which variable. We have an event listener on update button, that's fine. And then we have elements bracket I style dot background image is equal to, and that may be where it doesn't like it, but elements isn't a constant and it's still working. So let's ignore that error for now. But what happens when you have multiple elements on the page? So in this case, go ahead and make this a class so that we can use it twice. It's going to stack these. So we'll make this make it in line. maybe an inline block rather, because inline can't have the width and the height. All right, so here's our inline block. Put them side by side. We're appending this guy over here to the DOM. And so now I just want to update the image. So the thing is, right now we have this little toolbar, and it's just, you just plug in a URL and you click it. Work. Fantastic. And we're not getting a very obvious error. So what's going on? See if we can debug this. It's supposed to work with multiple. Let's just go see where it updates it. Element I style background image. It's not doing anything. So if this is the click function, we'll go ahead and just do a console.log. See if that thing's working. I have a bunch of errors, but they're not necessarily from our code. Whatever you want to call it, browser extensions. All right. So we want to see if anything happens. Okay. There we go. This is more helpful. So now it's saying hello, but then it's saying uncaught type error assignment to a constant variable, HTML button element anonymous. So somewhere in here, it doesn't like, it's probably this right here, the const I is equal to 0. So let's do a let I is equal to 0. I would have used const, but I also didn't think that was an issue, but I'd have to take a second and think about it. It doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and just see what happens if that was what it was complaining about. But it didn't like the const keyword in the for loop, and that's fine. So that's the thing about copying code from ChatGPT, is it doesn't always get it right. So you take it all with a grain of salt. It's very helpful for increasing your productivity, 100%. We wouldn't have gotten to where we are in the amount of time that we've gotten just by sitting here trying to brainstorm and write this code. Chat definitely has increased my productivity in that way. So, but you gotta pay attention to the code and figure out if it's right. It was using the var keyword, and it was trying to put a const in the for loop with the instantiation of, or not instantiation, but the I variable initialization. So why do they make all these words sound similar? Instantiation, initialization. It's confusing. All right, so great. It's working, except this is universal. It's going through all the images on my page. I don't want that. I want it to where I click on a specific image and I say, that's the image I want to change. So rather than trying to write that, we'll check chat, make sure we got a good connection. Fingers crossed that it's going to work for us. Okay. So we're going to say rewrite the following code so that it adds an event listener to each identified element on the page. Each identified element with a background image property. No, say on the page. So it adds an event listener. We'll say it adds a click event listener to each identified element with a background property, allowing the user to input a URL that replaces that element's background image specifically. And then we paste in the code for the existing application. And if I'm right, chat is going to look at this and go, oh yeah, I can do that. No problem. So the nice thing about this for someone like me too is typing code can be, just typing in general can be stressful. You still have to type the prompts, but you have a lot more breaks in between, and a lot less just like trying to think of the correct syntax and write it properly, analyze it, and everything happening all at one time, which ergonomically is problematic because it just get more focused into it and stressed out on your body. This is how I feel specifically. I don't know how other people feel, but I have found that like this type of workflow where I'm letting chat do the writing and then I come back and just say like that works, that doesn't work, use this, don't use that, is a lot better in my opinion for me. Relieves a lot of stress that would come from just having to type it all myself. So that's a nice little feature, I feel like. All right, so it finds all the elements. That's the code we had before. Adds an event listener to each element to update its background image. So it iterates over each of the elements and it adds a click listener. And then, it does a prompt. That's fine. We'll do that in a second. So this is it kind of, it'll work, but it's not what we really wanted it to do. So if you paste that in, make sure that we copy this. So now if you click on one of these camels, it's going to give you a prompt and it's going to say enter the new background image URL, which actually is not terrible. It's not something you generally do. Normally you'd put like an input on the page, but whatever. Let's just see what happens. It worked, right? So now that image has a new, but here's the thing. The way that it assigns it, just FYI, if we inspect it, is it's assigning it directly on the style attribute. Okay, so the original element style, the .main, has the original image, and it's just being overwritten. And so will our implementation of this do the same thing? Yes and no. We don't want to update the style attribute. What we really want to do is we want to update the style in the database associated with this element. So that's like a whole nother thing. Currently, the way the database is structured, let me just pull it up. Let's show you the schema. If we go over to models template, I think we're calling it. Okay. In the template has a title, description, and file name. Title, it says it's unique. I'll probably change that later. Description is just like telling you a little bit about the template. That doesn't have to be unique. And then the file name does need to be unique. And that's what allows us to load the template from the views directory in our templates folder. The data is this is like the kicker here. So if you have the website with the header, the H1 and the H2 and the paragraph and whatever other text elements all over the website, our app, when someone uploads, when it creates a new template, if they're saying, hey, this is my template, I want to upload it. Currently, the way it could be set up is that they could dynamically create new inputs to say there's going to be an H1. So we're going to, and identified by its ID of heading 1. And that way we know, okay, if we want to load some H1 text from the database for this specific template, we go look for the heading 1 field inside of our data map. And the data map is going to have, of course, all unique key value pairs. All the keys will be unique. And it can be dynamic. So we have a defined schema here, but once you get inside of data, it's going to be unique to every implementation of the template. So one template will have a whole different tree of text nodes as opposed to another one. And so that process of like telling the designer, like when they upload the template, like you need to go identify, like first you need to put IDs and everything, and then you need, like, that's not an automated programmatic way of doing it. And so ideally what would happen is the IDs wouldn't matter. They would just be unique. and we would have a script that traverses the DOM and says, just similar to how we just did it with the image, where we said, hey, to go through all the elements, and if the element has a background image property in its get computed style, then assign it to this elements array. In this case, you would just go through and say, hey, is this an element with text content? And if it is, then we need to go ahead and assign an ID to this element so that we can select it and do things with it. Meanwhile, we need to have a corresponding field in the databases in the instance of this template's data object or map. We need to have a key or field that correlates with this ID that we've just generated. All the IDs will be unique, but then you have this one-to-one for every single element on the page that has text so that you can update that text content. So we haven't fully implemented that yet. The way that we're doing it currently, I think I just hard coded if you look at like the instance in the database, I just hard coded the data fields inside of the map specific to this one really simple template that we're doing. So that's the next step, is to go through wherever my original website is you go through something like this, and when someone uploads their template, you got to go through and programmatically assign the IDs and then the corresponding data fields in the map in the database. So that's another thing we'll work on, but let's see if we can bring our code over and pop it in here. I do want to rewrite this real quick though to use an input. Just for brevity's sake, we'll leave the input out for now. I'm just going to pop it over there and see what happens. So let's take the JavaScript and head over to public scripts page editor, and I think we can just put it at the bottom here. Not super great organization, but we can clean that up later, or we can have chat clean it up for us. So here we're saying find all elements with the background image property, add an event listener to each element, update its So if this works and we save this, we go back over here and we refresh the page, the purple text will disappear. I think my server is turned on. What's happening? It's not letting me turn it off. Something weird. So we're going to close that and run a develop. Says we're connected. Not sure why it timed out. We'll view our templates. We'll go to that one that we have over here. And now if we click on the camel, this is the moment of the truth. It asks us. Okay, so we need a URL for it. So we'll go back over here and borrow this URL. And we'll go back to our website. Oh no. We'll refresh it real quick. That's an interesting thing to note. If you go away and you come back, the image was gone and the pop-up was gone. So again, probably the reason why we would want to implement it differently and have an input over here in like a toolbar or something. So let's say from the user interface perspective, like you click on this as opposed to having a pop-up and then you enter the URL and click OK, which there it is, took a second. Again, these are not optimized images, so they'll take a fraction of a second to load. But rather, if you click on this, isn't that cool? We clicked it again and it's asking again. Even though this is a brand new image, it still has the listener. But rather than having this little pop-up, the prompt, if you press cancel, it kills it. So that's not good. So rather than having the pop-up, if we had a hidden slide out menu that when you clicked on it, it slid out and then it had the file upload or text input thing, then that would be ideal. So that's a little more advanced, definitely something to throw into the backlog. And I think the finished feature will obviously look like that. But all right, so we've made a little bit of headway. Now on our website, obviously that doesn't persist. We'd want to get that in the database. So that's the second thing, is like, this is one image. You could easily hard code it and say there's one image in here and this is the URL for it in the database. But the reality is we need to go through and find all the images, have IDs on them and then corresponding fields in that data map so that we can upload and update the URLs for each of the elements by their ID. All right, so that's a whole nother thing. But for now, we can go ahead and commit this. And we can say add simple image update feature. So ideally, like this is a very small application project that I'm just messing around with. Like I showed you, I've got my little cards over here that I'm working through, my user stories, and these aren't even up to date. Like it still thinks that we're doing a website resource and we're actually using the template, and I'm going to update that to something else anyway. Point I'm trying to make here is technically you'd want to have like a README, some documentation. We do have some good comments in here because a lot of this code was written by chat, and chat likes to comment everything. So that's good. We come back later. It's documented in that way. But if you had a README file with some more thorough documentation, that would probably be ideal. And then a change log. So you, depending on how you write your commits, you can kind of have a quasi change log here, right? Okay, we added this, we added that, and if you drill down into it, you might be able to figure out what's going on per commit. But more ideally, you'd have a change log that would say specifically, this is what was added, this is what was removed, this is what was changed, etc. So we'll update GitHub, and we're going to stop it there. Thank you, everyone, for spending some time with me. Before we go, the software that I'm using is called Opus for it's opus.pro is the website for streaming. Check them out. If you're a streamer in any capacity, YouTuber or Twitch, whatever, then check out Opus. Pretty cool stuff. I think right now it currently integrates with YouTube and LinkedIn, but they're growing quickly, and I'm sure they'll have more integrations in the future. They have a Discord channel. I don't think they integrate with Discord just yet, or they have a Discord server. But hopefully they'll integrate with Discord in the future too. Discord already has some pretty good internal tools, but I'm sure it'll open up to integrations later. So that's it. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something, and we'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.